The wind cut across the graveyard like it had a personal grudge, howling through crooked headstones and bare cottonwood trees, carrying snow that stung the skin and burned the eyes. Caleb Holt pulled his coat tighter as he stood before the grave that had already taken too much from him. Mary Holt, his wife, gone 3 winters now. Yet the ache still lived in his chest like a lodged bullet. Christmas Eve had a cruel sense of humor. Of all nights to remind a man what he had lost. The town of Red Willow lay quiet behind him, lights dim and distant. Folks gathered around warm fires and hymns. While he stood alone with the dead, the lantern at his feet flickered, casting long shadows, and that was when he saw it. Something dark against the white snow, a shape that did not belong beside Mary's grave. His hand dropped to the grip of his revolver, heart pounding, breath freezing in his lungs. Because whatever it was, it moved. Caleb took a step closer, boots crunching softly, eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his hat. The shape shifted again, and a sound slipped out, weak, broken, human. He swallowed hard, lowering the gun, kneeling despite the cold biting through his knees. There in the snow lay a woman, half buried, her dark hair tangled and frosted, coat torn, blood staining the white ground like spilled ink. She was alive, barely, her lips blue, breath shallow. One hand stretched toward the headstone, as if Mary herself had been her last hope. Caleb's throat tightened, memories rushing in of holding his wife during her final hours. Helpless then, helpless now, except this time the world had not finished yet. He brushed snow from the woman's face, whispering, "Stay with me, miss, you hear me?" Christmas was not done dealing its cards before the grave. Before the snow, before the woman, there had been a different Caleb Holt. A rancher with laughter in his voice, and a future that felt wide as the plains. Mary had been the heart of that life, strong and kind, with eyes that saw good even in men who didn't deserve it. When sickness took her, slow and merciless, Caleb buried more than a wife. He buried faith. Prayer felt hollow after that. Christmas hymns sounded like lies, and every December since had been something to endure, not celebrate. He came to the grave every Christmas Eve out of habit and guilt, as if standing in the cold proved he still cared. Tonight was no different, or so he thought, until fate placed a bleeding stranger at the feet of the woman he loved most. Caleb shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around the stranger. Lifting her carefully, she weighed less than he expected, like life had been draining from her for some time. She groaned softly, eyes fluttering open just enough to show fear. "Please," she whispered, barely a sound, "don't let him find me." Caleb felt anger spark, sharp and sudden. He didn't ask who him was, didn't need to. Trouble had a familiar smell, and this woman wore it all over her. "You're safe," he said, voice rough but steady, as he rose and turned toward his horse tied near the fence. Snow thickened, wind howled louder, like the night was daring him to fail. But he didn't. He mounted with care, holding her close, and rode toward his ranch, leaving Mary's grave behind, unaware that what he carried was more than a wounded woman. It was the beginning of something he thought long dead. The cabin lights glowed warm against the storm, a lonely beacon on the open land. Caleb kicked the door open and brought the woman inside, laying her near the hearth, flames crackling, casting color back into her frozen skin. He worked with the practiced hands of a rancher who'd patched men and beasts alike, cleaning the wound at her side, stitching where the knife had gone deep. She cried out once, then fell silent, exhaustion pulling her under. Caleb sat back on his heels, chest rising and falling hard, staring at her face, young, maybe late 20s, with a strength etched beneath the pain. She did not look like trouble, but trouble rarely did. Outside, the wind beat against the walls. Inside, something shifted in the quiet. The clock ticked, the fire popped, and Caleb felt it. The unfamiliar weight of responsibility, the dangerous echo of hope. He brewed coffee, strong and bitter, though he barely touched it. His eyes kept drifting back to the woman, watching for signs of life. When she stirred again, her gaze focused clearer this time. She tried to sit up, failed, grimacing. "Easy now," he said. "You've been through hell." She swallowed, eyes filling. "My name is Eliza," she said, voice shaking. "Thank you for helping me. I didn't know where else to go." Caleb nodded, didn't offer his own name yet. Strangers were safer that way. "Who hurt you?" he asked. Eliza hesitated, glancing toward the window, like the dark itself might be listening. "I can't say. Not yet. But he's close, always close." Fear radiated off her, raw and real, and Caleb believed her. because he'd seen that look before. On men hunted by other men, night deepened, snow piling high, red willow cut off from the world. Eliza slept fitfully, murmuring names Caleb didn't recognize. He sat nearby, cleaning his rifle, listening, thinking of Mary, of how she would have knelt beside this woman without question, how she would have said, "Some folks are sent to us for a reason." Caleb scoffed at that kind of thinking now. Yet here he was, doing exactly what Mary would have done, protecting a stranger on Christmas Eve. He rose quietly and stepped outside. Standing beneath the stars barely visible through the storm, breath steaming, he looked back toward the graveyard in the distance. "I don't know if this means anything," he muttered to the dark, "but if you're watching, Mary, I'll keep her safe, no matter what comes inside." The fire burned steady. Eliza slept on, alive, because someone still cared enough to act. Caleb closed the door, locking it, loading his rifle, setting it by the window. Danger might come with dawn, or it might come before, but he was ready. Something had changed tonight, something fragile and powerful, like the first crack of ice before spring. Outside, Christmas bells rang faint from town, carried by the wind, and for the first time in 3 years, Caleb Holt did not turn away from the sound, because beside his late wife's grave, in the cold and the snow, a miracle had already begun. Morning came slow and grey, the storm having spent its fury some time before dawn, leaving the land buried in silence. Caleb woke in his chair by the fire, stiffness in his bones, and his rifle still across his knees. For a moment he forgot why he had slept there. Then he heard it, a shallow breath from the pallet near the hearth. Eliza was awake, her eyes open and alert, despite the pain tightening her face. She watched him like a cornered deer watches the tree line, ready to bolt or fight. "Easy now," he said softly, setting the rifle aside. "You're safe for the moment." She nodded but did not relax. "Safe is a word that hasn't meant much to me lately," she replied, voice steadier than the night before. Daylight revealed more of her wounds, bruises along her arms, a healing cut near her temple. Marks had told a story without words. Caleb brought her water and a bit of bread. She ate slowly, like someone who had learned not to trust full meals. Outside, a crow cawed, and Caleb felt the old ranch instinct stir. Danger often came dressed as calm. He checked the perimeter before speaking further, scanning the snow for tracks, finding none yet, but snow could lie, covering truth as easily as it covered blood. When he returned, Eliza was sitting up, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the fire. "You didn't tell me who you're running from," Caleb said, not accusing, just stating a fact. She flinched at the word running, then lifted her chin. "His name is Silas Crow," she said, and the way she said it told Caleb everything. "Crow," he repeated, the name sour on his tongue. Some men carry reputations like brands burned deep. Silas Crow was one of them, a drifter turned enforcer, a man who collected debts in pain when money failed. "I worked for him," Eliza continued, "not by choice. He owned a saloon outside of Laramie, used it as a front. When I tried to leave, he decided I belonged to him." Caleb's jaw tightened. Crow didn't lose what he claimed. Caleb turned away, pacing, the past pressing close. Crow had passed through Red Willow years back. Trouble followed him then, too. It had been Mary who'd convinced Caleb not to get involved. "Some men bring storms with them," she had said. "Better to let them pass." Now the storm had arrived on his doorstep anyway. "Crow will come," Caleb said finally, "if he hasn't already." Eliza nodded, eyes dark. "He always does. I thought if I could reach the graveyard, hide among the dead, he wouldn't look there." She paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't know whose grave it was. I just collapsed." The irony settled heavy between them. Mary's resting place had become a shelter for the living. Caleb felt something twist inside him, anger mixed with a strange sense of purpose. "You can stay until you're strong enough to move," he said, "but if Crow shows up, I won't hand you over." Eliza studied him, searching for cracks, finding none. "Thank you," she said, quietly, like the words cost her something by midday. Tracks appeared on the ridge, faint but deliberate. Caleb saw them through his field glasses. A rider, maybe two, moving slow, searching. He didn't tell Eliza at first, didn't want fear undoing what strength she had left. Instead he prepared, checked his ammunition, saddled his horse, moved supplies closer to the cabin. This land had been his life, every rise and dip familiar as scars on his hands. He knew where to stand, where to wait, when to move. Still, he felt the weight of decision heavier than any saddle. Helping Eliza meant choosing a side, meant inviting violence back into a life he'd tried to keep quiet since Mary's death. The loneliness he carried had been painful but predictable. This was something else entirely, unpredictable. Alive, the riders arrived near dusk, two shapes against the snow, coats dark, posture loosed with confidence. Caleb recognized one immediately. Silas Crow had a way of sitting a horse like the world owed him the ride. He reined in near the fence, eyes scanning the cabin, smoke curling from the chimney. Crow smiled, a thin thing without warmth. "Afternoon, Holt," he called out. His voice carried easy, like they were old friends. "I hear you've got something of mine." Caleb stepped onto the porch, rifle resting in his hands. "I've got a guest," he replied. "That's all." Crow chuckled. "Sound sharp as broken glass. Guests usually knock. This one bled all over your snow." Caleb didn't move, didn't blink. "She stays." Crow's smile faded, replaced by something colder. "You always were stubborn, Holt. Shame about your wife," he added casually, like tossing salt into an open wound. Caleb felt heat rise, but he held it down. "You should leave, now." Crow glanced at his partner, then back. "Or what? You'll play hero. It's Christmas." After all, the first shot cracked the air. Not fired but chambered, the sound a warning. Crow lifted his hands, slowly, mocking. "Easy, easy, no need for blood, not yet." He tipped his hat. "We'll be back, Holt. Storms pass, but they always leave damage." The riders turned away, retreating into the fading light. Caleb stayed frozen until they vanished. Only then did he exhale, knees weak, heart pounding. Inside, Eliza had heard everything. She stood in the doorway, pale but upright. "I told you you wouldn't stop," she said, guilt heavy in her voice. Caleb met her gaze, then nodded. "I know. That means we don't stop either." The words surprised even him, but once spoken, they felt right that night. Caleb dreamed of Mary, clear as if she stood before him, her hand on his chest, her smile sad but proud. "You always did know when to stand your ground," she said. He woke before dawn, heart racing, the dream lingering like a promise. Outside, the land lay quiet again, but the quiet had changed. It felt watchful now, waiting. Caleb brewed coffee and shared it with Eliza, who moved stronger than the day before. Pain still there, but no longer ruling her. "I won't run anymore," she said, meeting his eyes. "I'm tired of being hunted." Caleb nodded. "Then we make them regret it," he replied, a hint of the old fire in his voice. The man who had once defended his land and people without hesitation was waking up as the sun crept over the horizon, casting gold across the snow. Caleb and Eliza stood side by side at the window, watching the world hold its breath. Danger loomed, but so did something else. Trust, resolve, maybe even redemption. Christmas had come with blood and fear, but also with choice. And Caleb Holt had chosen to live again, to fight, to protect. Outside, the wind carried distant bells from Red Willow, clearer now, brighter, and though the battle was far from over, hope had taken root in the frozen ground, stubborn and unyielding. Just like the man who stood ready to defend it, the day dragged heavy, like the land itself knew what was coming. Caleb felt it in his bones as he moved through the cabin, checking weapons, counting bullets, setting traps where snow and shadow worked together. Eliza helped where she could, tearing cloth for bandages, loading spare rounds, her hands steadier now. Fear still there, but sharpened into resolve. By mid-afternoon, the quiet grew unnatural. No birds, no wind, just the weight of waiting. Caleb stepped onto the porch, scanning the ridge, and there they were, silhouettes against the pale sky. More riders this time, for at least, moving with purpose. Crow did not come to ask again, he came to take. Caleb rested his hand on the doorframe. Mary's voice echoed in his mind. Some things are worth standing for, even if they hurt. He squared his shoulders and stepped back inside. "It's time," he said. Simply the first shots came with the dusk, echoing across the open land, splintering wood, sending Eliza ducking behind the table. Caleb returned fire with calm precision, each movement deliberate, years of ranch life and old fights guiding him. One rider went down hard, another pulled back, shouting curses into the cold air. Crow's voice cut through them all, sharp and commanding, like a man used to being obeyed. "Burn him out if you have to." Caleb felt the heat of anger rise again, not fear, not now. Smoke curled where a lantern smashed near the porch, flame licking at dry wood, but snow and quick action kept it from spreading. Eliza crawled toward him, eyes fierce. "I won't hide anymore," she said. And before he could stop her, she grabbed the spare rifle. Caleb hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "Stay close," he ordered, and together they faced the storm. Crow dismounted, confident as ever, strolling forward with his revolver loose in his hand. "Holt," he called. "Come on out. This doesn't have to end ugly." Caleb stepped into view, rifle leveled. It already did. Crow laughed, but there was tension now, cracks in his certainty. Eliza moved beside Caleb, standing tall despite her wounds. Crow's smile twisted. "There you are," he said. "You always did make things difficult." She met his gaze, voice steady. "You never owned me. That's where you were wrong." Something flickered in Crow's eyes, not regret, but surprise. People like him never expected defiance to last. He raised his gun, and the world seemed to slow. Snow drifting, breath visible, memories flashing through Caleb's mind. Mary laughing in summer fields, her hand slipping into his, the grave under moonlight, the woman he had nearly lost, and the man he had nearly become. The shots rang out together, thunder in the stillness. Crow staggered, surprise etched across his face as he fell backward into the snow. His men scattered, some firing wildly, others fleeing outright. The fight ended as quickly as it began, silence settling heavy and final. Caleb stood breathing hard, rifle smoking. Eliza swayed, then steadied. "It's over," she whispered, tears freezing on her lashes. Caleb nodded, stepping forward. Crow lay still, the storm he carried finally spent. Caleb did not feel triumph, only release. Like a knot long tightened had finally loosened. He helped Eliza sit, wrapping his arm around her shoulders, holding her as the night reclaimed the land by morning. Red Willow knew the story. The sheriff came, took Crow's body, listened quietly as Caleb spoke, nodding with the kind of understanding born from hard years. "Some men don't stop until they're stopped," he said. "You did what you had to." Eliza gave her statement to, stronger now, no longer hiding in half-truths. Justice, slow and imperfect, had finally taken a step in her direction. When the lawmen left, the ranch felt different, lighter, like air after a storm. Caleb stood alone for a moment, looking toward the distant graveyard, snow untouched again. He tipped his hat. "Thank you, Mary," he said softly, not sure who or what he was thanking. Only knowing it mattered. Eliza stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she chose to. She helped mend fences, cooked meals that filled the cabin with warmth, laughter slowly returning to a place long silent. Christmas Day came quiet and bright, sunlight dancing on snow. Caleb found himself smiling without effort. The pain was still there, but it no longer ruled him. Grief had not vanished, it had transformed, becoming something he could carry without breaking. Eliza joined him on the porch, handing him a tin cup of coffee. "Merry Christmas," she said, and for the first time in years, the words did not feel hollow. They rode out together that afternoon, stopping at the cemetery, the wind gentler now, the land at rest. Eliza stood respectfully back as Caleb knelt by Mary's grave, brushing snow from the stone. "I didn't forget you," he said, voice low, "but I'm still here, and I think that's what you wanted." Eliza stepped closer, placing a small wreath she had made from pine and twine at the headstone. "Thank you for lending him to me," she whispered, tears shining. The moment felt sacred, not heavy, but full, like something had come full circle, life honoring death, love carrying on without erasing what came before. As they rode back toward the ranch, the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold and crimson. Caleb felt something he had not felt in a long time, peace, not the kind that forgets pain, but the kind that grows around it, stronger for having endured. A miracle had come that Christmas, not loud or perfect, but real. Born in snow and blood and choice, beside a late wife's grave, a broken man had found purpose again, and a hunted woman had found safety. The land stretched wide before them, uncertain but alive, and for the first time since loss had darkened his door, Caleb Holt rode forward without looking back,